Following the encounter with the zombies, the party rest. On the 7th turn, they steal along the corridor until they reach a door at its southwest end. On the 8th turn, another wandering monster is indicated. There is no surprise. The party sense a disturbance in the northeast wall as the stone parts, revealing a secret door, which a figure steps out of and within 10 feet of the party. The party win the initiative. The figure in question, as revealed by the flickering torchlight, is a fighter, clad in plate mail armour and shield. An anti-hero. For a meagre 100 or so XP, it's not worth the fight, so the party flee back up the corridor. The anti-hero pursues at armoured foot speed, so is unable to catch them this round. On the 2nd round, the party wins initiative again, and they pass through the broken door to their left, across the room beyond and through a spiked door on the far side. The anti-hero chases them through the broken door, but then gives up, seeing the adventurers as of little account. The figure turns his attention to a door at the east end of the room, opens it, and melts away, back into the darkness beyond, to continue his own adventure. The party wait a while for the anti-hero to leave, and then they spend turn 8 retracing their steps back towards the long corridor where they first bumped into the anti-hero. On turn 9, Cedric and his heavy-foot retainer step forward and pry open the secret door once again. Beyond is a room where the air is still. After listening at a door on the left wall but hearing nothing, this thick door takes several attempts to force open, revealing a dank passage, thriving with mould. The party move along the passage and listen at another door to their left, but this door is also too thick for sound to penetrate. Cedric and the heavy foot force this one first time, however, and beyond is an even mouldier room, with cracked floors and walls caused by the pungent spores. As the room appears empty, the party abandon it, reluctant to risk breathing the musty spore-filled air. As the party turn to leave, they notice the faint sound of splashing or lapping water off to the east. The party follow a side passage, which curves southeast, and the sound seems to grow louder, perhaps. On turn number 10, they arrive at an east-southeast intersection. The eastern passage is wider. Lying at the ground at this intersection is a broken pole. Its origins are unclear, but the party proceed to the east with caution, and after about 30 feet, at the edge of their torchlight, they make out a door straight ahead and a discarded pick handle lying on the ground, perhaps a remnant tool from when these damp passages were tunnelled. A wandering monster is indicated here. The party are surprised by 2 giant beetles that scuttle up along the dusty floor, approaching the party from 30 feet behind. They use their surprise advantage to cut to melee distance before the party can act. One attacks Bird alone, and the other attacks Finnick. The statistics for the giant beetles are as per the OD&D Blackmore supplement by Dave Arneson, as the original Monsters and Treasure does not give any specific stats for giant insects, but says armour class can be anything from 8 to 2. Hit dice should range from 2 to anywhere near 20, and if the referee is not personally familiar with the various monsters included in this category, the participants of the campaign can be polled to decide all characteristics. Damage caused by hits should range between 2 to 4 dice. which is 2 to 24 hit points of damage. Well, I cannot pull at short notice, as this is a solo campaign, and I do have to keep in mind that the giant beetle is on the level 4 monster table, as listed in Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. The closest type of beetle we have in Blackmoor is the boring beetle. Kudos for this monster's name. Of course, I could have come up with some stats on the fly, but this is a perfect opportunity to incorporate one of the OD&D supplements, so why not? The party wins the initiative on the first round, and the characters unopposed will attempt to surround the beetles. However, they will have to wait until the second round of melee to do this, and in the meantime, the beetles, who have 5 hit dice, get 5 attacks against Finnick and 5 against Bird alone. These characters are no match for such ferocious monsters and are easily destroyed. Amoris can make a return blow as she is in melee range, but she misses, and so ends round 1. The party win the initiative once again and use their movement to allow the unopposed ranks to surround and gain rear and flank attack positions. The rear and flank attackers strike first, gaining +2 on 3 of the 4 attack rolls. 2 hits, but still no kills. The beetles can now strike a total of 10 frontal attacks against the heavy foot retainer and Amoris. Both figures are slain. Enough hit points of damage has now been scored to justify a morale check for the beetles, who need a 6 to remain, and roll a 10. On the third round, the beetles win the initiative. The beetles turn to face their rear attackers, but will receive second blow position against them. However, the characters' attacks score no hits. Then the beetles get their attacks and easily take out Alara's Lightfoot retainers. The party win the initiative on round 4, and realising this is not a fight they can win, they try to flee to the east, where 3 of them throw their weight against the door at the end of the corridor, and lucky for them, the beetles do not follow. The party rest for 2 full turns after their escape, finding themselves in a small 10 foot by 10 foot room. We are now on turn 13. A strong wind blows above the party, and the smell of urine and excrement is carried along this wind. A ladder leads up to daylight above. The party have discovered a secret entrance to the dungeon beneath the castle. They ascend the ladder and emerge amidst vegetation in the centre of a small island in the middle of the castle's filthy moat. To escape the dungeon, the party must swim across the moat. To prevent drowning, Viridis and Cydric discard their chainmail. There is now a 5% chance of drowning for each character. Nobody is unlucky on this occasion. The party escape the castle of the quest. So, in this adventure, we had the mouldy walls, a broken pole, and a discarded pick handle, which are general features, which I introduced to the random dungeon generator as per my previous discussion regarding dungeon dressing. They can occur when periodic checks are made for passages, or when the party enters empty rooms. These features can affect party behaviour based on common sense logic, such as abandoning the idea of exploring a room potentially filled with poisonous spores. They also provide aid for the imagination when deciding upon the purpose of an area. A broken pick handle, for example, suggests that some of the mazy passages have been dug by humanoids. Rationalisation is key, and this form of figuring things out as they occur creates an emergent world. Noise works the same way. The lapping of water heard as the party left the moldy area of the maze was rationalised by me as the castle's moat, as it was directly above the party's location on the upper level. This also has an obvious connection with why the walls in this area might be mouldy. These walls are seeped with damp, so as you can see, sometimes random rolls can coincide with previous determinations if you give them a little nudge. They also introduce a certain amount of implied speculation, which through imagination can be a great tool for determining the origins of the dungeon. I recommend keeping such ideas loose in the mind where possible though. They can help apply rationale to later results on the dice, and over time carve out an interesting history regarding the origins and nature of the dungeon. The reason I say keep it loose is to always maintain the element of mystery whereby even the solo player does not know for certain anything and their understanding can change as new discoveries are made. So here ends the questing knight's second expedition into the castle of the quest. After just 2 hours into the expedition itself, the party took heavy casualties and unfortunately did not acquire any treasure. They did, however, discover a secret entrance. The week of game time required for such a delve takes the campaign date to the 14th of September. Heavy casualties were suffered in the previous delve, so once again the adventurers must visit the guild hall and find new player characters. Now, after playing several delves solo using the OD&D rules, I am beginning to gain a clearer picture of how challenging this game can be. Low-level characters are easily destroyed, and in a group game, players would roll up new ones and jump back in. We need to recreate this, and so it seems perfectly fair to me that player characters lost to the maze should be replaced by new player characters. But that's not all. In group games, new players come, old players leave, so there is no hard or fast rule on how many player characters should be in a party. I guess it's a question of how many a solo player is comfortable handling. I think for my campaign, 9 characters feels about right at the moment. The rewards are slim, so retainers are costly. The party have only been able to employ 1 or 2 thus far. With what they have achieved, the guild hall are impressed by the stories of the surviving adventurers, their map of the dungeon, and of course, the treasure already brought forth, so there is no lack of adventurers willing to try their luck. I roll up 6 new characters to take the party to 9. The rolls are not great. Standouts are a cleric with 15 wisdom and a magic user with 17 intelligence. These new adventurers are of little importance. As is the way in OD&D, survival is rare, and it can take many adventures just to level up once, unless by sheer luck a fantastic treasure is acquired, but the chances are quite slim. The way the questing knights operate is starting to emerge as my strategy of play is starting to form. Ilara Nightshade is the leader, not because of high charisma, but because she is the only remaining original member, and has the map and the most knowledge of the dungeon. This is her opportunity to earn enough wealth to fund her research into magic. So she has taken it upon herself to organise a group of willing adventurers and continue to delve. It is the newer willing recruits, if their armour is sufficient, who take the front ranks, and more experienced members command from the centre to protect the legacy of the group. Characters who survive long enough earn greater protection. This is, of course, harsh treatment, with retainers getting the worst of it, but morale will play a factor into how this works out. Once the new characters are rolled up and starting gold determined, their basic equipment is bought. Ilara, Viridis and Cedric also replace the consumables as required: rations, torches, ammunition, etc. Viridis and Cedric must also replace their armour. The party also purchase a raft, which they intend to carry across land and use it to cross the castle moat, so they can use the secret entrance without having to remove armour. They can then hide the raft amongst the brush of the island of the moat and hope it is still there upon their return. The party begin preparations for their next expedition immediately, and another recruitment campaign is conducted to improve the strength of the group's forces further. The party desire 2 heavy-foot knight-at-arms. Their budget for the campaign is 356 gold pieces. This brings me to another method of operation the questing knights demands of their members. All wealth is pulled together and spent according to the benefit of the group, and not the individual. So any wealth that comes with the new recruits via the 3d6 multiplied by 10 roll is pooled, basic equipment bought according to needs, and then brought together to hire retainers. What is left over once spending is complete is simply divided amongst the rest of the party evenly. So, taking their overall budget of 356 gold, they post notices to attract candidates which cost them 100 gold pieces and yields a 40% effectiveness. The campaign reaches 12 potentials, of which 4 apply. After face-to-face negotiations are made, 2 accept roles, and the whole campaign costs 300 gold pieces and requires a week of game time, which brings the date to the 21st of September, when the 3rd expedition will begin. The party carry the raft over land and row themselves onto the island of the moat, where they descend the hidden shaft into the dungeon beneath the castle of the quest. They arrange themselves as 2 heavy foot at the very front, followed by 3 new members, all clerics. Sister Atra, Brother Hugh and Brother Holger. Behind them is Viridis and Cedric, the party's 2 fighters, followed by Ilara in the 4th rank, who will be the torchbearer. Abra the Strange and Maud the Magnificent, 2 ambitious new magic users, will stand by Ilara's side, mapping under her instructions, and will fall back if necessary, ready to unleash sleep spells, perhaps, if the rear needs protection. The last in line is an elf, adventuring this time as a fighter. Her name is Ella Moonshadow, and she will cover the final rank. Now, I don't want to continually cover the same examples of play in repetition, so as I've said previously, I will just cover what I think is important. So concerning the 3rd delve, which begins on the 27th of September, the party begin to explore the dungeon further, mapping as they make progress. This is business as usual for the first 40 minutes or so, until a wandering monster is indicated on turn 5. As they are exploring a new area in the southeast portion of the map, heading south down a narrow passage, 3 magic users suddenly emerge from a secret door to the party's right, running into their flank. The magic users are all 3rd level conjurers. There is no surprise on either part, but the distance is at 10 feet, so they are straight away in melee contact. So here's the thing, It makes no sense for magic users to be wandering around a dungeon without protection. Looking at the 3 brown books, there is no guidance on what such a composition of force might be for magic users appearing in the underworld as wandering monsters. This is left to the referee to decide. A good source of guidance is the section in Underworld and Wilderness Adventures regarding castle inhabitants, which can include magic users. So referring to this as a guide, we can deduce that magic users encountered in the dungeon are either hostile to the adventurers on die 1 to 3, or neutral on die 4 to 6. And they will always be guarded by at least 2 normal types. I've thrown together a table to determine the type of guards that will be present, and this is dependent on the level of the magic user encountered. Much of this can be deduced by reading the monster descriptions for human types, and studying the way their forces are composed. For example, higher level magic users of chaotic or neutral alignment are sometimes associated with bandits, brigands, or even orcs. Because OD&D is so compacted, it's advisable to really study the pages pertaining to the monster descriptions, as lots of useful stuff can be extracted and applied elsewhere to make more informed decisions as a referee. Using this kind of information as a guide, and developing some stuff of your own to fit into the gaps, is perhaps the first step in how an OD&D game can begin to form its own unique flavour, and it helps to bring the subtly implied setting to life. The party wins the initiative against the conjurers and their guards. I decided 3 heavy foot might be about the right level of challenge for this encounter. The party uses their initiative to change their facing so they are no longer flanked. As the encounter is with intelligent creatures, the monster reaction table in Book 3 will be used. The result is uncertain. The heavyfoot guards do not attack, but they are cautious, so they point their weapons at the party's front ranks, aiming at their throats. On the next round, the conjurers win the initiative. The result of the monster reaction table is uncertain once again. "Move an inch and we'll cut throats," the guards say. The party's response to this is that their 3 magic users will cast Sleep, as this is the spell that each of them memorised before the delve commenced. But will these spells take effect before the guards can make attacks? The answer is yes, because magic spells take effect before the melee phase. How do I know this? This is a tough question to answer, as the chainmail turn sequence does not mention magic spells, and the OD&D books also give no mention of how long they take to cast. If we look to the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons combat procedure, which is an evolution of the one given in OD&D, then we can discover some useful clues. First, it's important to know the similarities and differences between the 2 systems. Like OD&D, AD&D combat is divided into 1-minute melee rounds, as Gary refers to them. It's important to note this, as he uses the word melee interchangeably, meaning both hand-to-hand combat as a subcategory of combat, and the combat itself. This is quite confusing. A major difference with the AD&D system is that the combat turn, aka melee round, is divided into segments of time. This idea was first introduced in Eldritch Wizardry, so there is indeed an obvious link between AD&D and its OD&D predecessor. Regarding these segments, each AD&D spell has an associated casting time, which can vary anywhere from a single segment of time all the way up to several rounds or turns. In OD&D, spells have no associated casting time. So taking this fact, when using non-segmental combat and relying on the chainmail turn sequence, it can only be presumed that somewhere within the combat phases, movement, missile fire, melee, etc., a magic spell phase should exist in its own right, or spells should take effect during one of the predefined phases. So where should it be placed? In the AD&D Player's Handbook Guide on page 104, it says that most of these attacks, referring to spell attacks, will happen near the end of the melee round. As I've already said, when Gary is referring to melee round, he means a full round of combat and not the melee phase which exists within it. If we place spellcasting before movement, then this would be at the beginning and not near the end of the combat round. During movement would mean near the beginning. After movement or during the missile fire phase would mean near the beginning or in the middle. And after melee would be at the end. This only leaves after the missile fire phase and before melee. So keeping the phases distinct, we end up with movement followed by missile fire, followed by spellcasting, and ending with melee. But is it actually realistic that a spell can be cast before an opponent can attack? Yes, absolutely, and I'll tell you why this makes sense. Because melee is a combat abstraction, where each round lasts a whole minute in length. So the action is not blow for blow, but covers a series of strikes, manoeuvres, parries, feints, and so on. So the question of getting a spell off before a blow is struck is more a question of can the spell be cast before the enemy manages to take advantage of some opening in the defences of the meleeing characters. It is more realistic, therefore, to presume that during the course of a whole minute, where only one good opportunity is likely to occur, there is more than sufficient time to get a spell off. In fact, in OD&D, casting a spell is a matter of uttering a charm, as is described in Jack Vance's Dying Earth novels. Gary himself describes the OD&D magic system in detail in Strategic Review magazine in April of 1976. He makes it clear that the system is based on Vancian Magic, and that the spellcaster must be able to speak and move their hands in order to cast. In such an abstracted system of combat like the alternative combat system, there is really no requirement for much other consideration. Looking closely at the Dying Earth stories, there are a few examples of these types of magic in action. When Turgeon has an encounter with Prince Candive, it is made clear by the prince that he can pull a lever to open a pit before Turgeon will have time to utter a spell. If this was an OD&D encounter, we might rule that Prince Candive could pull the lever in the movement phase, and Turgeon would not be able to release his spell until afterward, so this fits. In another example, Mazirian manages to utter a spell as soon as he notices a Deodand springing to the attack. If this was an OD&D encounter, Mazirian would get the spell off just prior to melee, so the Deodand would have time to move in for the attack, but would not get a strike before the spell takes effect. So as you can see, placing spellcasting after missile fire and before melee fits the fiction. So all this being said, bringing the focus back to the game, my party's magic users are able to get off 3 sleep spells, and their conjurations are successful. The party search the sleepers. There is a 30% chance, 15% per conjurer, of a wand, staff, ring, or miscellaneous magic item. This results in a ring of delusion, which Alara, as the self-appointed leader, will acquire. This brings me to my final point of interest for this session. The ring of delusion is meant to trick players. The ring is described in the following way: a ring which makes the wearer see whatever they desire, i.e., a bummer thrown in to fool players. If players know this is a ring of delusion, then this trick could not land. So the idea being suggested here is that magic items, such as magic rings, are not automatically identified. Instead, they must be experimented with, taken to an expert, and so on. How can something like this be handled in a solo game? I had a brief think about this and came up with the following approach. When a character first acquires a ring, they will need to succeed on a saving throw versus staves and spells, or they cannot resist putting it on before it has been identified. Identification of magic items can be attained using a detect magic spell. I think this is a reasonably simple but elegant approach. Alara makes her saving throw, so she puts the ring away safely, and when she returns to the last redoubt, she can memorise a detect magic spell from her spellbook and deduce that the ring is indeed a ring of delusion.